For today's recipe, I'm going to show you how to make shortcakes, which are sweet biscuits. For this recipe, you need 240 grams of all-purpose flour, 3 tablespoons of granulated sugar, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, which is our leavening agent, and 1/8 of a teaspoon of salt. You'll also need 142 grams of cube butter chilled and 168 grams of buttermilk. The equipment that you're going to need is a pastry blender. If you don't have a pastry blender, you can use a fork. You'll need a whisk, a wooden spoon, a rubber spatula, and a portion scoop. The smaller or larger it is will determine how many shortcakes you have. This size, which is about 1 ounce, will get you about 12 shortcakes. You'll also need a sheet pan lined with parchment paper. Now to prepare this recipe, I'm going to take my dry ingredients. I'm going to take my flour, I'm going to take my sugar, and I'm going to take my baking powder and salt and combine them together well. I like to use the whisk for this so that it can get any of the lumps that are in the flour out, and it also helps to evenly distribute all of the ingredients. We want to make sure that the sweetness and the salt are evenly distributed. Now I'm going to add my small cubed butter in. This butter has just come out of the refrigerator. It is cold, and the reason why you use cold butter is because when you use the pastry blender and break the butter down during the baking process, the final product will not be greasy. It'll be flaky and it'll be actually a nice light and airy consistency. So you're going to use this pastry blender by gently pressing down and turning the bowl at the same time. This ensures that you are breaking all of the butter down into small pieces during the process and not just focusing on one area of the bowl. So now you are going to continue to do this until you have cut down the butter into small pieces about the size of a pea or a pencil eraser. You should periodically clean the pastry blender to make sure any of the butter and flour that has gotten stuck in between the blades are cleaned so that you can use the tool more efficiently. So now I'm ready to add my buttermilk because my butter has been broken down into small pieces, even all the way throughout the whole mixture. If you do not have buttermilk, you can actually substitute milk with a little bit of vinegar. So this recipe calls for 2/3 of a cup of buttermilk. I would take 2/3 of a cup of milk and I'd add 2 teaspoons of white vinegar to it. Let it sit for about 5 minutes and that mixture should be able to duplicate the flavor of buttermilk. So I'm going to combine all of these ingredients well, making sure not to overmix, because anytime you overmix a recipe that has baking powder or baking soda, the more you mix it, the less potent the leavening agent becomes. I like to switch over to a rubber spatula right towards the end because I like to be able to scrape down the sides of the bowl to make sure that I'm completely getting all of the ingredients. I'm going to knead the dough just 2 or 3 times while it's still in the bowl to bring it all together, and then I'm going to get ready to portion it out. I use a portion scoop to prepare these for baking, but if I wanted to roll it out and cut them free form or with a round circular cutter, I can do that as well. Just notice that when I am scooping them out, I'm going right into the dough and filling up the scooper completely, and then evening it out on the bottom so that they are all equal in size. You also want to space them out a little bit from each other because they will puff slightly when they bake. So this is a 1/4 sheet pan and I am actually going to get 12 of them on here. They will get a little bit bigger than the size that you see right now. Now to prepare them for baking, I'm just going to sprinkle a little bit of sugar on the top. This is going to add a little bit of flavor and a little bit of caramelization to the top of the shortcakes. Now I'm going to bring them to my oven. I'm going to put them in the middle of the oven. The oven was preheated to 350 degrees, and I'm going to cook them for about 18 minutes, and I'm going to take them out when they are nice and golden brown on the top and on the bottom. Now I'm going to let them cool before I finish preparing them. While they're cooling, I'm going to make a little bit of whipped cream. I'm going to take a stainless steel bowl, and I'm going to add half a cup of heavy whipping cream. Then I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of powdered sugar. You can use regular granulated sugar if you want, but this one melts a little bit better into the whipped cream so you don't get any crunchy bits in your whipped cream. And about 1/4 teaspoon of vanilla extract. Now I'm going to whisk the ingredients together, and I'm actually going to make sure that I am using the proper technique. You do not want to stir this. You actually want to whisk it or whip it. What I like to do is hold the bowl on the side and whisk it that way. This way I'm actually lifting the cream instead of just stirring it. And what I'm doing here is mixing up all of the fat molecules in the cream, and as I'm doing that, I'm creating air, and those fat molecules are actually getting stuck into the bubbles that I'm creating, and that's what's going to give it its nice fluff. I'm going to keep on mixing this until I get something called stiff peaks, and stiff peaks are basically when I take the whisk out of the cream, the cream stands up tall and it doesn't fall off of the whisk or doesn't fall over. But you do have to be careful, because if you keep on mixing the cream too much, eventually those fat molecules burst inside of their bubbles and then come back together. And what actually happens is you create butter. So there is a fine line between whipped cream or creme chantilly and butter, so you have to be careful. So I'm almost at the end of this whipping, and it probably takes about 3 to 5 minutes depending on how pliable your whisk is, how cold your ingredients are, right? A cold heavy cream, if the bowl is cold to begin with and the whisk, you'll have a much faster process. Now I'm going to prepare my strawberries. I have cleaned and dried about 8 strawberries for this recipe, and I have about 1/4 cup of strawberry jelly. You can use strawberry preserves, you can use raspberry if you want, whatever flavor you have in your house is really good. This is just to add another level of sweetness. I'm going to use a paring knife for this process. I like to use a paring knife because these are small, delicate cuts. And sometimes if you use a larger knife, especially if you're not used to using it, you can smush the berries instead of making small dices. So if you're going to make a dice cut, we are going to always start with the same technique. We make a slice, then we turn those slices into stick cuts, which you see that I'm doing right here, and then you turn it and you cut it one more time, and that is how you get your dice. So here you go again, slices, okay, put them in a stack that you can handle, then you do your stick cuts, and these are about 1/4 inch wide, and then you go into your dice cut. And we're going to do this for all of our berries. After I finish cutting all the strawberries, I'm going to put them back into a small bowl, and I'm actually going to add my strawberry jelly or my strawberry preserves or whatever flavor that you have to add. If you did not want to add jelly or jam, you can actually make macerated strawberries, which is just taking these strawberries, adding a little bit of sugar and a splash of lemon or orange juice to it, and let them sit, and they break down and have really great flavor. I had jelly at home, so I decided to do it this way, and this is the way we do it in school. So when I'm done incorporating the jam or jelly, I'm going to get ready to prepare my shortcakes. I'm going to take my cooled shortcakes, and I'm actually going to cut them with a very sharp knife. It could be a serrated knife or a small paring knife. But you're going to do this very gently because these are very delicate and they will fall apart on you if you are too rough with them. So I'm just going to cut them in half because I'm going to kind of stuff them like a sandwich. And so as I'm cutting them, I am placing the tops on one part of the cutting board and the bottoms underneath them. This way I can have like an assembly line for when I am filling them. I'm going to cut all 12 of them in half, and then I'm going to start to fill them. I'm going to put about a tablespoon of the strawberry mixture on top of each one of the bottoms of the shortcakes. I want to make sure that I am evenly putting the same amount in each one of the shortcakes, and also making sure that I have enough for each one of my desserts. So after we fill all of our bottoms of our shortcakes, we are going to start to add our prepared whipped cream to the top. When we make whipped cream like this, it does not last for many days. So I like to make this whipped cream or creme chantilly when I am ready to use it. Just make sure you keep it cold before you're ready to put it on your shortcakes. So I'm going to put about 1.5 tablespoons of whipped cream onto each one of my shortcakes, making sure that you are evenly distributing it so that every shortcake gets enough whipped cream and that you have enough to go around to all of them. Make sure you scrape the sides of the bowl when you get down towards the end so that use all of the whipped cream that you prepared for this recipe. If you have any left over, it does taste good on top of ice cream or a bowl of fruit as well. So now I'm going to take the tops of all the shortcakes and put it right on top of the whipped cream. And at this point, I'm almost done with my dessert. This last thing that I would like to do is I kind of bring them all together on the cutting board. I take a fine mesh strainer and about a tablespoon of powdered sugar. I put the powdered sugar into the strainer and I dust the top of the shortcakes with the powdered sugar. They do have shakers that you could do this with, but I actually don't have one, so I find that this strainer is a good tool because I can use it for more than one purpose. I'm going to put them on a platter and they are ready to serve. I hope you enjoyed this recipe. Please let me know if you try it at home.